For hardness and strength, it's out of this world.
I can tell you officially that's where it came from.
A seminal science fiction film from a master director where the film is not carried by wall-to-wall ray guns and special effects, but by the dialogue and performances. Basically the complete opposite of my 12-part science fiction epic, Bang Bang Goes Pew Pew in Space.
But by threatening danger, your planet faces danger.
An alien visitor brings a strongly worded note in The Day the Earth Stood Still.
You must say these words: Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
The Day the Earth Stood Still was a 1951 science fiction movie made on a relatively modest budget, but it is a film where the people who made it missed the memo that said that all science fiction movies in the 1950s have to look really cheap and be dashed out in less time than it takes me to change the battery on a leaf blower.
You see, the basic problem is to overcome the inertia and...
Washington, D.C. receives a visitation when a flying saucer unexpectedly lands on Washington, D.C.'s National Mall, which is unusual enough as it is. Also, it's incredibly scary for anybody already on the ground, and also quite inconsiderate since I'm fairly certain that I'll never get the stains out of the picnic blanket.
Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I think something is happening.
People flock from everywhere to get a look, and the army have set up a perimeter when the ship opens up and out pops a man.
We have come to visit you in peace and with goodwill.
Then the giant robot Gort appears and starts zapping the weapons of the army contingent before being stopped by the man whose name is Klaatu.
It was a gift for your president.
He's cagey when asked about his mission, insisting he'll only talk about it with all of the world's leaders, who in turn reply with telegrams saying, "Nah, no way, Space Jose," and poop emoji.
And your name is Mr. Klaatu?
Just Klaatu.
Klaatu absconds from the hospital and heads to a boarding house where he introduces himself by taking the name of the man whose clothes he's knocked off. I'm sure it's not a reference to anything else, unless of course later on in the film he dies and comes back to life. I don't know, I haven't actually watched the whole film. I just outsourced that part of the review to somebody on Craigslist, who outsources it to somebody on Fiverr, who uses an AI trained on a half-heard conversation of two dudes at Comic-Con who once read a Wikipedia article about Day of the Jackal. It's all a complex web. Carpenter meets two of the other residents, Mrs. Helen Benson and her son Bobby. Bobby is of course at the age where he's fixated on the spaceship and the missing alien that everyone's looking for. He and Mr. Carpenter quickly form a bond as the youngster shows Carpenter around Washington, including a quick visit to his father's grave. Having failed to convince the US government of the seriousness of his mission, he drops in on the smartest man in the world, Professor Barnard, and leaves a message by adding to some equations on a blackboard. Helen is being squired around town by insurance salesman Tom, who seems quite happy for Carpenter to babysit Bobby as it allows for some quality alone time with Helen, which unfortunately for Tom now seems to be many conversations about Helen's favourite topic, Mr. Carpenter. Who's Mr. Carpenter? Where does he come from? Does he merely cut the wood, or does he also nail things? Barnard's government minders eventually track down Carpenter, now identified as the man who wrote on the professor's blackboard, after a somewhat tragic misunderstanding that ended with a university janitor being shot.
Have you tested this theory?
I find it works well enough to get me from one planet to another.
Klaatu reveals his mission to the professor. Earth's technology has reached the point where they might be taking their petty squabbles, wars, and baseball into space with their newly developed atomic technology, a development that cannot be tolerated. Barnard suggests a demonstration of Klaatu's power to show the world that he means business.
Something dramatic, but not destructive.
Tom, of course, has become incredibly suspicious of Carpenter, especially after finding diamonds in his room, where Bobby admits that he swapped $2 for 2 diamonds worth probably thousands.
Well, she doesn't like me to steal from people.
All of a sudden, almost all power has stopped, whether it be derived from combustion engines or the electric grid. Though there are these curious exceptions where it would be dangerous to suddenly be without electricity, such as planes in flight, hospitals, and adult theatres. Klaatu's demonstration of power was meant to scare the leaders of Earth into listening to his message. Klaatu confides in Helen, who tries to stop Tom from narking on Klaatu. Tom, who by this stage is purely an asshole, thinks he's gonna be a hero, but he'll be a hero without a +1 at his imagined medal ceremony. Klaatu is shot and mortally wounded, while Helen passes on a message to Gort.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
The robot rescues Klaatu, returns him to the ship, and somehow restores him to life. Klaatu appears to a group of scientists invited by Barnard to lay down the ground rules. As far as the other alien worlds are concerned, what happens on Earth stays on Earth. But once humanity's technology gets to the point where it can export its, well, without being too indelicate, its inhumanity, then the smackdown is coming.
Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration.
Klaatu returns to his world, safe in the knowledge that Earth and its inhabitants will take heed of any warning and manage to sort themselves out. Don't laugh, it could happen. The Day the Earth Stood Still is a great movie. Unless, of course, you have no knowledge of it and just assume by the title that the movie is a little static. The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is now over 7 decades old when this review was posted, was and still is a bona fide classic movie. It's unusual for a sci-fi movie from the 50s for the aliens to be relatively benevolent and uninterested in conquest. Klaatu is not exactly friendly, since his job is to hold out a carrot in one hand and the destruction of all life on Earth in the other.
Stands to reason that fellow wants something, otherwise he wouldn't be here.
It started with a 1940 short story, Farewell to the Master, by Harry Bates. A UFO sighting later that decade popularised the idea of flying saucers, which influenced producer Julian Blaustein to try a science fiction film. Unusually, he had agreement from Fox's studio head Darryl Evsanek to make this type of film, and then he set about searching for a plot for his movie by reading dozens of existing novels and short stories. Harry Bates' story would prove to be the perfect jumping-off point for a story that echoed the paranoia of the era, the hysteria brought about by the development of atomic weapons, and the ongoing Cold War.
He must be tracked down like a wild animal. He must be destroyed.
To write the movie version, Blaustein brought on a friend, Edmund H. North. Robert Wise had already directed around a dozen feature films with a mix of horror, western, and film noir thrillers. The Day the Earth Stood Still would be the first of 3 science fiction films that he would direct, and it was by far the most human. Some movies are just about action, others are about something, and some even have something to say.
Would you care to talk about it?
I'd be glad to.
This film is an engrossing yet fun film that's not an out-and-out adventure movie with wall-to-wall action. This film is more about tension and the anticipation. The anticipation of Gort being let off his chain and wrecking everything in sight. But of course, it's not that kind of film. Here, the outsiders looking in have seen Earth's violent proclivities and that they could be contagious. Klaatu ain't fooling around when he says that if Earth tries to take war, or even worse, baseball to the stars, then things will get messy.
I'm afraid there is no hope.
For many decades, science fiction would hold a reputation in Hollywood as being a genre that was purely for B pictures. Every now and then an expensive science fiction movie would come along and do okay, but it wouldn't be until the late 60s before you started seeing major stars appear in the genre. The Day the Earth Stood Still is unique for a 50s sci-fi movie in that it wasn't an out-and-out conspiracy movie, a horror film, or alien invasions.
Though this man may be our bitter enemy, he could be also a newfound friend.
The Day the Earth Stood Still was not 20th Century Fox's biggest film of the year with a budget of a bit under $1 million, but it did well enough to be considered successful and was the 13th highest grossing film released in North America that year. Robert Wise would go on to be a prestigious director with films like West Side Story and the massive smash The Sound of Music, and of course science fiction films The Andromeda Strain and Star Trek The Motion Picture. So bringing a really good director onto a film like this elevated it more than you can imagine. The film's Washington locales were mainly created in Los Angeles, with a small second unit filming some footage in Washington DC itself. I tried this trick once where I tried to mount a television remake of Die Hard, but we couldn't get permission to film in a skyscraper and we had to settle for filming in a beachside bungalow. Unfortunately, no one bought it when our Bruce Willis clone jumped off the roof into the swimming pool.
I can judge only by what I see.
For The Day the Earth Stood Still, the main cast never left California, performing some scenes in front of projection screens. British actor Michael Rennie had only recently moved out to Hollywood, with The Day the Earth Stood Still being his first role as first-billed star, though he'd mainly find more work as a supporting player or on television. As Klaatu, Rennie is suitably alien, hiding threats behind a smile, much like your school principal when they're doing double duty as a guidance counsellor. As Carpenter, he's trying very hard to appear personable without being very obviously an alien spaceman with a giant robot as a belligerent co-worker.
We automatically assume he's a menace. Maybe he isn't at all.
Patricia Neal would later win an Oscar for Best Actress. Here, Helen is unlike any other woman in a 1950 science fiction film. She has her own strengths and does not spend the movie hysterically screaming. Hugh Marlowe starred in some smaller pictures like Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, though he'd often appear in supporting roles. Sam Jaffe as an Einstein stand-in was the role he seemed to play a lot, though this would be his last film for several years after being blacklisted. To sell the realism, several newscasters of the day played, well, newscasters, and in a blink or you'll miss it role, Guy Williams, who later starred in Lost in Space, which was a show whose original pilot would repurpose this film's musical score.
And that would be a little awkward.
The film clearly had an adequate enough shooting schedule for this film to be shot properly and not dashed out in a week like so many B science fiction and horror films often were. Look at Day the Earth Stood Still. This was a film with some lovely black and white photography from the tail end of the film noir era, and it's often lit like a film noir. You half expected Klaatu to kill Bobby and frame Tom for his murder. The film noir look helps enormously with the film's pervading air of paranoia and fear. Klaatu taking the name Carpenter was a bit obvious, and yes, he is killed and comes back to life just in time to let the people of the Earth know that they will not get the chance to export our favourite pastime, war, to the rest of the solar system, and while they're at it, keep baseball as well.
This Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder.
The special effects are restrained in that there are a few special effects sequences, but they're spread throughout the movie. The optical effects still look the business, as does the design of Klaatu's vessel. But what everybody remembered was the robot Gort.
This power cannot be revoked.
Gort is not big on speaking engagements, but he is big, played by 7'7" performer Lock Martin in platform shoes. They wanted a look that did not have joints, and while it now may be obvious that it's a rubber suit, it was still an impressive and minimalist design. Gort says nothing, but can apparently destroy the entire planet. In other words, he's silent but deadly. Bernard Herrmann provided a suitably eerie score, one that possibly defined how a 50s science fiction film should sound. For that spooky, creepy noise, Herrmann used not one, but two theremins. The theremin was an electronic instrument with a pair of antennae that is played by moving your hand up and down without physically touching the instrument, like playing an air guitar, but in a tuxedo. It's also a pig of an instrument to play in tune. One hand moves up and down to control the pitch, and the other would move laterally to control the volume. The Day the Earth Stood Still was a film that was released several decades before I was even around, but it's become one of those films that has stuck around for a reason. It's exceptionally well made and tells a fantastic story. Whenever The Day the Earth Stood Still popped up on television, I'd be there for the duration, glued to my seat, partly because the film was just so good, and partly due to the fact that I had forgotten that I'd put a tube of superglue in my back pocket. Nevertheless, it's a film that's referenced in unusual places, even to the point where it provided some names for minor characters in Return of the Jedi. So, like anything that fires the imagination and becomes beloved, it was remade, this time in 2008, starring Keanu Reeves, Jennifer Connelly, and John Hamm. It's telling the same basic story, but one that's been expanded so that there's something happening in every nook and cranny.
The human race is killing it.
And it's much more of an action thriller with a lot of CG that probably wasn't that great for a big movie in 2008. The film did okay, but not amazing numbers, but reviews were really mixed because some people really hated it, and others liked it, well, at least bits of it.
Is it possible?
Looking at it now, it's okay. It's not terrible, but it's different from the original, which I know for some automatically makes everything terrible. However, that is the crux of the problem. The original is still so good, you need a better than okay film for a remake to have been worth it.
In such a case, the planet Earth would have to be eliminated.
The 1951 film of The Day the Earth Stood Still is an influential achievement on many levels. A 1950s science fiction film that still holds up in most areas of the staging, lighting, special effects, direction, and most importantly, its story and acting. And it has to be said, Gort rocks. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
Says their medicine is that much more advanced. He was very nice about it, but he made me feel like a third-class witch doctor.